German lawmakers have been paying tribute to the last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, during a commemorative session of Parliament. The Bundestag's president, Bärbel Bas, delivered a speech in his honour, and the Parliament observed a minute's silence for Gorbachev, who was buried in Moscow last week. Gorbachev's reform policies led to the end of the Cold War and to the reunification of East and West Germany. Bärbel Bas reflected on Gorbachev's legacy.
President Gorbachev
was a man of peace. He changed the world for the better. He made possible what had seemed unthinkable for decades, a peaceful end to the Cold War and to the division of our country and our continent. We Germans have much to thank Mikhail Gorbachev for.
DW political correspondent Nina Hauser followed the events in the Bundestag for us today. Nina, very unusual, I would have thought, for a German parliament to remember a foreign leader so extensively. What was said about that and also what's happening in Russia today?
You know what, I really did ask myself that same question. Have they ever done that for a foreign leader? Because we know for German heads of government, for example, we know that they do commemorative events like that. But even the Bundestag archive themselves, we call them, they didn't have any records. They couldn't tell us straight away. So I think it has been a unique event. And this is, of course, because of Gorbachev's massive role. He is a revered figure here in Germany because of his policies, his openness, his friendship with the Chancellor Helmut Kohl, and all these things led to that path that then became German reunification. So Germans are eternally grateful and essentially also across the political spectrum for his role in that. So maybe the Bundestag would have done it anyway, but the fact that he died this year also brings it home even more just how much current Russia is different from the Soviet Union in the late 80s. And of course, Gorbachev and Putin are completely different people. So Bärbel Bas had a very strong message also to today's Kremlin and said, you've destroyed everything that Gorbachev stood for, and that is a tragic mistake that you're turning your back on these things.
Yeah, that comparison was very clear. But the war in Ukraine and its ramifications here in Germany were, of course, also featured in the debate that followed the commemoration event. Let's hear from Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the opposition leader Friedrich Merz.
We will not make any decisions that cause Russia's criminal war against Ukraine to escalate into a war between Russia and NATO. But we will do what is necessary. It is exactly along that policy line, closely embedded in the alliance with our friends around the world, that we support Ukraine and will do so for as long as is necessary. Mr. Chancellor, we regret to say that we cannot trust your assurances. Along with the purely financial questions of equipping the German military, you and your government are not fulfilling the clear will of the German parliament to supply Ukraine with an adequate measure of heavy weapons.
So an unsurprisingly opposing view there, of course, from government and opposition. But Germany's support for Ukraine has been quite contentious. Is Germany doing what it can, all it can, to support Ukraine?
There was a minor diplomatic row between Berlin and Kyiv, let's face it, because of Germany's reluctance, essentially, to send heavy weapons to Ukraine. They've now done that. They've, for example, delivered 10 howitzers and also 15 air defence tanks, amongst other things. The Ukrainian Prime Minister came to Berlin last weekend and he thanked Olaf Scholz and said the Germans had made progress, but, of course, he wants more. And, amongst other things, Ukraine wants Leopard 2 tanks, and those are combat tanks from the German Bundeswehr. Olaf Scholz has so far said no. Also, the air defence system, the IRIS-T, that Germany has promised 4 models of. Prime Minister Schmyhal said they need 12. So this is something where Olaf Scholz appears to be standing on the brakes still. He reiterated again today in the Bundestag that he cannot go it alone. Germany cannot go it alone. It is watched extremely closely also in Moscow by Russian propagandists. What does Germany do? What is Germany doing? So as soon as Germany becomes too active, this will be seen as a confrontation in Moscow. And Olaf Scholz doesn't want that role. He doesn't want the conflict to extend to a conflict between NATO, essentially, and Russia. So that is something. And then other people are also saying, well, he does have a very left-wing anti-weaponry group in his own party, and they are also having an influence on him. And we're probably also going to have to assume that the German government is also still hoping that one day Putin will realise that he cannot win and that he will show some willingness to step back from his ambitions in Ukraine, and then they need to be ready to have a plan, essentially.